It's midnight somewhere. I think it's time to start our dialogue at dusk, yeah?
It's midnight over the ocean currently. The
Oh,
fish
yeah.
are sleeping soundly. Tomorrow
Yeah,
Somewhere
they'll
in
be
the
the
getting us
perfect.
up.
Atlantic, it's midnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they wake up, they'll watch our recording, provided I edit it fast enough. So, hello everybody. Welcome to Dialogue at Dusk. Today we are going to be talking about transmuting the competitive into the cozy. And to facilitate this talk, we're going to have our guest, Eric Dittmore. Will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Yeah, honored to be here. I am a newer game designer. I've been designing. I started designing games first as a gift for a sister. A wedding gift for my sister was my first game design, and have just kind of done it as a hobby. I've never published a game yet, but I have got the confidence to call myself a game designer from being in community, right? From being in Break My Game and Protospiel Online are the big ones that I participate in. Um, and yeah, so I'm a teacher by profession, and design games as a hobby. And I would say more recently, very recently, I've been starting to think of it also as an art, right? As I am starting to think about more about like the meanings that I want to convey through my games that I design. Um, I think of it as an art that I'm pursuing as well.
Very awesome. Yeah, you've been doing some really awesome work on this game adulting that it's been very exciting to watch develop and how it's like transformed over the years as you tinker on it. Um,
Yeah, thanks.
Perhaps perhaps I should also introduce ourselves. I'm Zoe, and I'll be one of the hosts, and then Matthew here, it'll also be a host.
Hello. Excited to be here.
Need
Um,
no introduction, the two of you.
well, you know. I'm super excited chatting today, Eric. There's a lot of just hearing your design journey and kind of watching it and seeing how you're exploring this and the art and design and all that has been great to see. And I was so excited and happy to finally play adulting. I know we have been going back and forth between trying to get me to that table for like I think 2 years. It felt like because we would be synced up at an event, but we'd
Hmm.
get caught up in different things, and so it was so much fun to play. And I'm really excited to dig in. I wanted to ask real quick because you mentioned kind of like navigating into this sort of art kind of thing. What is that like? Like, where did you
Hmm.
start with that? What did you kind of interpret it as first? How did you kind of get to it as art? Like, what was that transition like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, like I said, I mean, I literally just started designing a game with my younger sister as a co-designer as a wedding gift for our older sister. I grew up, in a family we love playing board games, and um, and so I think that has always given me the perspective of like I never started from a place of I want to be published, I want to be selling games. Um, Eventually I would love to be published. I would love to get paid for some games. That would be sweet. But it's like not the priority. And so then I think as I've come into these design communities, I think I've been fortunate to find myself in design communities that are very like creative and focused on exploring different possibilities within game design. And that's just where I've found my passion to be. What could this game possibly be? What could this possibly do? And I'll get into more specifics about my journey with adulting, and where that's led me. But I think in general, just being, reading through all the forums on Break My Game and just seeing the ways that people approach games so differently, um, has really kind of expanded my mind of what games can possibly be. And then I very recently, with I think a big influence to me recently has been Amabel Holland,
Mm,
who she's like recently become someone who's come on my radar, and I read her book in like 2 days, and so I've just I think that's really kind of got me thinking more deeply, as well as conversations with the two of you and with the community at large of what are the meanings that I'm putting into these games? Like, what am I trying to say? And I think to me, that is more interesting of a question than like, how can I make something that is going to hook people, enough people to, go mass market or sell.
Mm.
That's not the right term, but like to make it big and to sell a bunch of games is, I think personally, I'm more interested in what that message is. Maybe that's part of the teacher in me too, is like I can't create an experience for people and not be concerned with like what is it that I'm teaching them through the experience that I curate.
Awesome, awesome. I feel like this is a good segue into talking a little bit about adulting. So like adulting was originally designed as like a competitive single victor game, and over the course of your like development, it's been turning into something a bit more unranked, potentially victorless. It's been kind of fun to see how it's been changing in design. And then, so I wanted to ask, what were some of the motivating factors for you to sort of make that change to your game?
Yeah, I mean, I I think the strongest motivator was you, Zoe, and I felt personally called out when I watched the Emperor's high score. And in that video you talk about cozy games, kind of, you know, uh talk about the cozy games that are competitive and the kind of dissonance there. And that, like, I was like, wait a second, like that's my game. And I always, from the beginning, I had, adulting, the theme of adulting, as you're trying to kind of create this to-do list of things throughout your day and to manage them with this deck of attitudes that you have. And in the earliest versions, it was always, you do this in order to earn adulting points.
Mm.
And the very idea of people would ask, what is an adulting point? What does that represent? And and that question just irked me, not that people would ask it, but that was something my game that existed in my game, was this concept of an adulting point. How do you get a point for adulting, for just being a human in this world? And so I think that once I started to hear about unranked games and for that to like come into my consciousness, it naturally, I started to like become interested in moving adulting in that direction. But it was a slow process. I think there was a break in my game jam, in which one of the mechanics was non-hierarchical rankings, or
Mm.
something along the lines of that. And when that was a thing, I could not understand what that meant. I like could not wrap my head around it. I was reading all the things people were talking about. I was, a lot of people, I think, were asking questions about it in the forums and whatnot. But I I like it's like, what the hell is this non-hierarchical thing? How can a game do that? I don't understand. What is going on here? And it definitely took me a long time to like internalize and think about it. And I think I remember distinctly playing Vibes at a Protospiel Online. That's everyone here watching this probably knows Vibes. It's Zoe's game published by Lunar Punk. But I played that game and goes, oh, that's what non-hierarchical means. Like, oh, I see. Okay. Um, and I think it was that same Protospiel that Zoe, you played adulting for the first time. And we're giving some feedback on, what are these adulting points? What are we going for here? What am I really, who am I in this world where I'm this adult who's like competing on how well I can adult with others? Um, so I think, yeah, I learned about it, non-hierarchical stuff, and then I think just very slowly realized that was the direction I wanted to go. And it's been like playing other games in this design space.
Mm.
I there is like a growing community that y'all are helping a lot to facilitate around these ideas, and I think seeing what other people are doing has really helped to kind of expand, open my mind a little to the possibilities. Um, and yeah, it's been a process. I think when you guys played, it was I still had points in the game, right?
Yes.
You were like earning points. So there were still until that was like a month ago. Until a month ago, there were still adulting points. I like couldn't get rid of them for the life of me. And then finally, I think I was playing Duck Tuck Choose, and the idea of like needs and wants kind of opened my mind a little bit more. And I said, oh, wait a second, I can do something, without points at all. Um, and so finally, I think I moved in that direction, but it's challenging, and it's definitely changed the way that people react to the game. As I think it's a lot harder to get people on board with understanding what they're trying to do. And that's like my current journey right now, is how do I work with player motivations and think
Mm-hmm.
about setting clear expectations from the beginning of the game of what is it that you're trying to do in this game? What's the point of this game? That's
Awesome.
been that's
Yeah.
been the current challenge.
Player motivations are a pain in
Um,
the butt.
oh yeah.
Navigating that, it's
Yeah.
tough. Like even in single victor games, that's hard. And now you have this
Yeah.
experience where there's like vectors of play. You're
Hmm.
trying to like you're trying to suss out what are the motivations. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Have you found that how you're, like you mentioned player motivation, so I kind of want to dig into this a little bit. Have you found that as you've transformed this game and iterated over time, have you found that um, how you'd think about player motivations, like how to teach people how to think about player motivations, do you find that changes like how you present the game? Have you found like it kind of changes more
Hmm.
nuanced things outside of like how do you change that from like those motivations and transform them? What do you do for that?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's something that after my last playtest of adulting, I actually just sat down and was like, I need to think about how to teach this game. I don't necessarily
Mm,
even want to change a mechanic right now. I just really need to think about how to teach it. Um, because I think you're absolutely right. Like motivations are a challenge in any game. Um, However, I think that like the idea of points is something that everybody understands. You sit down and you say, "This is what you do to get points." It's like, okay, great. I know exactly. Now I'm going to think about what do what am I connecting those points to,
mm-hmm,
and up until about a month ago, that's what I was tinkering with as far as player motivations was what am I assigning points to.
mm-hmm,
Um, but I think without that kind of scaffold, I think there's an extra burden on teaching, um, on what are we even trying to do here?
mm,
Because if we're not trying to get points, what are we trying to do, right? And so I think that also trying to if I'm trying to avoid a word like win, that's also a challenge. I think
mm-hmm,
I remember playing Duck Duck Choose at Protospiel Online, and the idea in that game is wants and needs, and it was at least the version I played, and I remember a playtester saying, well, but how do I win? Like, do I need to get what I need, or do I need to get what I want? Like, which one is
Y-
winning?
right.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's such a deeply ingrained concept in game players, that like I think many people define games as like something that has a win-loss condition,
Mm-hmm.
um, that to subvert that, to like go around that, I think there's like another burden on teaching the motivations. So I think that for me been that has boiled down to thinking about, okay, what is it that I want my players to be doing, and what is the fun in this game, or the experience that I'm trying to create, and thinking about motivations that are going to be like create the kind of play patterns that you want to see within the game. But I also, one of the reasons that I've tried to move away from points was actually it was less that I was like hating the points, because in my latest versions I was okay with the way that they were interacting, but that it was limiting so much the ways that players could express themselves in the game because the game was telling them you have to act this certain way to to get points, which is the good thing to do. And so for my game, it's like an engine building game. Points were associated with like building a bigger engine to do more and more, right? And so the game was telling you you have to do as much as you can possibly do, and the more you can do, the better you are. And I think it was I keep talking about Zoe's ideas because Zoe so often it's like listening to you talk about something that like clicks something in my brain. Because I think it was your latest vlog that was um, something about mechanisms
The
that made
politics of mechanisms.
yes, the politics of mechanisms I had that switch in my brain of like I am telling people that to be a good adult you have to fill your day with tasks and you have to do things constantly, and the more you do the better of an adult you are, and like that's the message of my game, and that made me so upset. I was like, no, that cannot be the message of my game. If you want to do a bunch, that's great, but I'd like you to also be able to just do enough to feel good or to do whatever, is right for you. Um, so I think that that thinking about points and player motivations, it's like now I'm trying to find the way to, okay, how can I pull back on that, but then also still have like tension in the game, right? Where there's still, oh yeah, you can do whatever you want. Well, so then why am I playing this? Like, where's the tension? Where's the excitement? And so I think there's, so many of the mechanisms that we might be used to in board games, I think are built with this assumption kind of ingrained in them. Like engine building, kind of has this assumption that I want to build a bigger and bigger engine.
Right.
And I think actually Bread is a great example. Zoe's Bread is a great example of an engine builder game where I can have just enough. And as long as have good relations with my neighbors and nobody's messing with me, I can just build a small engine that runs efficiently enough that I get what I need, and I don't need to go more than that. Right? I could build an engine in 2 turns that is all I need for the entire game. But I better make sure other people are happy and don't mess with me. Right? So I think that the victorless or multi-victor and unranked games, when you're thinking about player motivations, I think there's a lot more freedom there to like explore different ideas. But also, I think there's like you almost have to think about subverting some of the ways that mechanics are typically used, because mechanics are so like ingrained in single victor experiences or ranked experiences, even if they're
Right.
cooperative.
Yeah, totally. I thought it was interesting, even back when we played adulting, like at Protospiel, like um, even the way that you were using points, I thought was interesting. Because you weren't necessarily saying that you won by having the most points, but you were kind of assigned like an outcome depending on how many points you had. But like the outcomes at the higher point ends were getting like a little bit more judgmental, good job, who'd you step on to get this many points, like and we found that kind of accurate to play because to like Matthew got a lot of points, but to do that he kind of leaned a lot on like me and the other playtester. Other playtester taking care of all the chores.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, he just left all the dirty dishes in the sink.
Yeah, dude. I was busy shopping, hanging out with friends. I think I took a nap. It was a good
That's
time.
awesome.
Yeah, I was having a ball. Thanks for getting all that done, by the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, absolutely. I got that idea from, it was a prototype of a game I played here in New York. That it was a cooperative game, and it was all about communicating with each other, and it was really like reflective on the ways that your group was communicating, um, and at the end the score it was a similar thing, where it had, you score however many points and you look at and get your result. And each result had a different like reflection question, on okay, so, if it was more standard of like if you didn't, it was cooperative, right? So if you didn't score well, it was like, well, what was the problem? Why weren't we communicating well? What could we do
Mm.
better next time? And so they kind of had these reflection questions at the end. And I thought with adulting, it was a way that I could kind of passive aggressively balance just by judging the person. But I think that ultimately, as a designer, I kind of want to move away from explicitly judging my players, um, and more allowing them to, or at least like in such a ham-fisted way as that, as like just straight up saying, you know, who did you mess with to get here? Whereas because I think there are ways to kind of embed that in the mechanics. Like I would like
Mm.
to do that in such a way that the person kind of feels, maybe if they're being selfish, they feel that just through gameplay, and the other players might be the ones who are coming down on them, or
Well, to that end,
like
I
in
think you
like in Bread,
succeeded.
for example.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think you succeeded that in adulting because I definitely was not contributing to that. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah,
me and the other player be like, Matthew, please, we just want you
yeah,
to take out the trash.
I was like, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
See that?
yeah, I got you, and then I didn't do it. Yeah, it was good. That was great.
Yeah,
So there's some really great narrative
yeah.
moments in that game.
Yeah, I think that the issue I had with that, with that design, was that the I was judging in one way because the game was judging because it was awarding you points, right? So Matthew,
Mm-hmm.
and even though again I had to have all these caveats, it was like I had to say points don't matter, it's you're just worrying about yourself. It doesn't matter who has the most. Like don't compare.
Yeah,
And it was fun to be like, sarcastic and
yeah.
and fat and like judgmental. Like that was kind of fun, but I think like that I think it would be more elegant and meaningful to like not have that be something that I'm like pasting on top of the game, but to be more kind of incorporated uh within the game. Um, but but I don't know. We'll see. Maybe who knows? I could always go back to adulting points. That's the beautiful thing
Yeah,
about
yeah.
game design, right? Is you can always pick back up an old version.
Yeah, yeah. I do really like the idea of abandoning like the strange nebulous idea of like points that you earn for adulting. So I'm really excited to see how like I've been reading up on like what you've been trying. I've been like really curious to try it the next iteration.
Yeah, thanks.
One of the things that you had mentioned was that you're kind of worried about how to like keep tension in the game once you changed it to be more unranked, where you're less of the tension is coming from like competing to have like the like to
Mhm.
be the most efficient or most like productive or whatever. So what have you done with like adulting to make sure that still maintains that tension?
Mhm. Um, I mean, that is kind of the current design challenge I'm working on right now.
Mm.
I think that I'm. It is. I mean, without the competitive aspect creating tension, I think that that part I've kind of done without for a while, and it's I think creating for that part, it's been like trying to balance the game system in such a way that you feel at odds with, being able to like reach whatever you're trying to do in the game. And
Mm.
when it was points, I think that points were an easy way to say, well, if you're having trouble getting points that you want to get. Now, as I'm moving away from that, in the game you are building this routine of different habits and chores that you're completing, and you have your attitude cards. And at the beginning of the game, a bunch of those attitude cards are stress. So the current iteration I'm playing with is your goal in the game is to just have like more of these healthy habits on your routine than you have stress left in your deck at the end of the game. So you're just, you can not do that many habits and just try to minimize the stress in your deck. You can try to just do a bunch of habits, but you're probably going to be having more stress in that way as well. And so
Mm.
trying to make sure that whatever strategy you take, there's still some tension that you're maybe not going to achieve your goal. And then I think the big thing for that as well, the thing that allowed me to really move this into multi-victor was incorporating the chores into the game, right? Which are these
Mm.
shared objectives. And that was the thing that unlocked, like, okay, I can make this not competitive, but I think I need something for players. Well, I'll say like a design goal of the game is to have there be some kind of player interaction. It's not just kind of a solo engine building thing, that there's some player interaction, and the chores I think have allowed me to create something that's okay, we all have to get these done, but how are we going to divvy them up, and who's going to take on the most chores,
Mm.
being where a lot of that tension lies. I think that a challenge I've had with those is just to like really make them interesting and not just feel like, oh well, I have to be the one who like doesn't do what I want to do this turn, and um, which maybe I'm okay with, because that's how chores kind of feel like okay, like I was just negotiating with my wife tonight on like, okay, I'll do the dishes so you can, finish your little self-care thing, and then but you cook dinner so I could do my self-care thing, and and so like that's really like the thing that I'm trying to create in that game, is an interesting tension where I'm like negotiating with the people around me to make sure that everybody's really like, I'm getting what I need. I'm like taking care of myself, but then I'm also being a good, partner or roommate, or whatever fiction you have for why you're living with these people, of to others. But then I also want to allow people like Matthew to be a little selfish and to be kind of the roommate that everyone's like annoyed with, and but so those are, I think, again, thinking back on player motivations, like the challenge I'm really having with this game is, when I had it so that everybody was going for the same thing, everybody was just trying to build the biggest routine they had, it was pretty straightforward, or at least I had solved the problem of how to make that tense, and how to motivate players to do that, how to make them feel like they had to be doing this thing. Whereas now that I'm trying to open up that space a little, I'm struggling with that, of like, how do I encourage players to take these different paths, and I think they will, right? I think that that's also something I'm realizing, is like, that's one of the things I'm thinking, is like, I think I just maybe need to teach this better, and like help them see the possibilities of how they could play the game, as much as I need to, like, maybe those possibilities are there and players just need to act on it. Like when I play a unranked game with the two of you who are not phased by the idea that there's no points, and we can kind
Yeah.
of take it as we want, it's a different experience than when I play with people who are totally uninitiated to that. um so i
The ex
think i think thinking that, yeah.
the expectation setting is a big part, and I think we've learned that time and time again ourselves. Because you have to teach players this, something that's fairly new for them, probably, at least in the tabletop
Hmm.
sphere. There's probably some unfamiliar language to that. There's probably some unfamiliar systems to that, and then there's probably unfamiliar player relations, and
Hmm.
players are all of the old assumptions. Not all of them translate as a one to one, right? And so it's tough.
Hmm.
I think your instinct is right that like figuring out the expectation setting in the teach, and how players communicate is high value. I was running a playtest a while back of Hollow, and someone had mentioned that someone asked a question about something, and this one player was like, "Oh, well, you need to do this to win," and then someone else was like, "No, that's that's not true. There is no winning. So no, you can do this or this. And then there was a whole argument about what is a win in the game, and it was really fascinating and interesting. And I loved it, but it also told me I need to clarify this just a wee bit further to set those expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you're going to win everyone over with this sort of thing. By the way, you're not going to
Yep.
get you're
Yeah.
not going to get them all. But the stronger the expectation, I think the better players can adapt into it, embrace it. Because I do think like a point system, weren't born knowing what points were. We that's a learned trait,
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's the same thing with this kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I played with a designer recently who I have a lot of respect for, and he ended with saying, um, my biggest piece of feedback is that I wish this game had points and I wish I was competing with others, and like I wish, that's because that's the game that I want to be playing.
Right.
And yeah, so I think like it's not going to be the game for everyone. And I think especially as someone maybe has as there's little options out there for what this looks like.
Yeah.
So it's like I didn't, I might not think that I like a certain type of game if nothing's hooked me in that genre yet. If
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been kind of brought in and it's like music. Like I listen to an album and I'm like, I like maybe this one song a little, so I'm gonna keep listening because I like this one. And then, I'm kind of vibing with this one too. Now that I'm like getting what
Yep.
this artist is going for, and now suddenly I'm listening to that whole album on repeat. And I think that it's with anything. It's like something that is new. I think always has a harder time like connecting to us. And so like I never when I made it multi-victor, but I kept points in the game. I never I re- maybe never is a strong word, but I really didn't have an issue. Like when I kept points in the game, people were
Right.
like, "Okay, great. I can get as many points as I want, and like I'm not going to brag about it at the end, but like I know what I need to do here."
Right.
And and then there were, and it was funny to see in those games too that some people I think would take on a bunch of chores and then kind of be grumpy at the end of like, yeah, I didn't really, you know, do what I want. I wasn't able to do what I wanted to do. I was like, well, because you were doing all the chores for everyone, like you didn't have to do that. But
Right.
so I thought, I think it's, but they maybe thought, well, someone's got to do these or we're gonna lose. And so yeah, I think it is really interesting to just see the way uh that people's expectations affect their play with a game, and that's
Right.
true, you know, multi-victor, unranked or not. But I think it is like this is a type of game that is going to consistently come up against that problem,
Right. You
against that challenge.
you hit on something that I'm really interested in these types of game experiences, because I think it's another possible roadblock. You mentioned like the player was like, I did all the chores, what the heck, right? I think a lot of games have a lot of rewards built into their systems, and unranked games, there are some of
Mm-hmm.
those, right? But there's also decisions sometimes where there is no reward, or at least not a direct
Mm-hmm.
reward, right? It's an implication of something else. It furthers this player
Mm-hmm.
interaction, etc. But there's not like, you did thing, now you get thing, right? It's just, you did
Mm-hmm.
thing, cool. And
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to sit in that, and it's a really interesting and tough thing. And I think when players start getting into it, they, like you said, like music, they really start getting into it. But when you first start, you're like, why don't I get thing? It's tough, because every game
Yeah.
ever, that's like the secret sauce for a lot of games, is like, I'm gonna keep giving you stuff, I'm gonna keep giving you stuff, you're gonna just keep getting stuff. And we just kind of get fed on that. And so nothing necessarily wrong with that inherently always, but I think it makes these
Mm-hmm.
games, like in particular, a big challenge for folks that are coming from those like traditional hobby spaces and traditional like systems of punishment and reward.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I'm like this idea of points being the high fructose corn syrup of board games. It's just like the easy thing to inject to like get
Hey,
people to like
Yeah.
understand it and like
I mean, sometimes you want that good stuff, I get it. Like you want that
Oh yeah.
real dirty food. I understand. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I don't think, and I know both of you have said this so many times, but like unranked games are not inherently better or more interesting games than those stinky point games. But but I'm making my basketball game that I can't just take points out of basketball, you know.
Yeah.
But I think that although what if? No, that's not happening. But I going back to what you were saying about that aspect of like there's parts of the game that are just like not gonna give that kind of dopamine hit in the
Yeah.
same way, you know. I think it's like it's interesting to think about like how to how do you teach that kind of thing? And I don't think you
Hmm.
do. I think it's like something that people just have to be exposed to and decide if they like or not. I don't think it's something that I can teach you like, hey, you should be going through this game that has times that are kind of it has like ups and downs more than maybe your game that's like you're constantly building towards victory. This
Hmm.
game's just like gonna have its ebbs and flows, and it's gonna end, and like maybe you did something that you wanted to do, maybe you didn't achieve what you wanted to achieve. um I think that a game like that, and I think two things I want to say on that is that I think that a game like that can be more challenging to get into, and that in itself can be a challenge. But I also just want to give the caveat that like that is not all unranked games, right? Like there's
Yeah.
lots of unranked games like Bread, I played Joe Kell's Sneaky Squirrels at Protospiel Online. Like that game was tense, and like there was a lot. Every moment of that game, I was trying to get the nuts that I needed to make it through the winter. Like there was not a down moment in that game. So, I'm definitely trying to create a game that has maybe more of that. I want it to feel cozy, and I feel like a cozy game and a unranked game
Hmm.
are not the same, not like synonymous.
Yeah, right,
Um,
right.
but
Um, Maybe every rule
yeah,
book that
go ahead.
opens up, that's one song needs to play where it's like, you can't always get what you want. And it just like starts playing. We need to license that song, Zoe. We gotta get
Yeah,
that and just
yeah.
put that in all the rule books.
Yeah.
That should solve everything. Like as soon as you open up,
Like
it just
those
starts playing.
like those like Hallmark cards when you open
Yeah,
it, it plays that song. Each rule book will like
yeah,
start with that.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah,
Just a
that
song.
sounds like
That should
that
solve
can't be too
should solve
expensive.
everything. Yeah, it should be really
Yeah,
cheap.
yeah.
Probably just a couple dollars. Just throw that in the rule book. Should be good to go.
Yeah,
Gosh.
that'd be an interesting licensing a song to go in a board game rule book. That would definitely throw that legal team for a loop.
Hopefully YouTube doesn't take this video down because I just like used like an unauthorized lyric or something.
Oh no.
Yeah,
Oh
you
no.
sing it really well. You're going to get us flagged.
Oh
Yeah,
no.
yeah. That
Um
was definitely on key.
uh, have you found like as you've kind of gotten to this point now, um I like to ask this, and I apologize, normally for these episodes we try to throw some questions together, and now I'm going off script a little bit, so
That's
look.
okay. That's
Yeah.
good. I love it.
I'm kind of curious. You mentioned earlier on didn't necessarily have like the biggest objective in the world, like you're not trying to make the multi-million-dollar board
Hmm.
game, right?
Hmm.
But when you kind of get this game to the end of that journey, or do you kind of have some suspicions on what you want to do with it, or some
Yeah.
ideas, especially since it's an unranked game that you're making? How do you
Yeah.
think you'll navigate that, or how do you want to navigate that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I when I mentioned at the beginning, like that I've been starting to think more of like board games as art, and myself wanting to create games as art.
Hmm.
Part of I mentioned Amabel Holland, but another thing that's really enabled that for me and like unlocked that for me is the like growing indie scene, and thinking that I can just make a game and I can print some copies and try to get them sold through Midnight Market or the indie game market.
Hmm.
Or I know, Matthew, you're a big advocate for just selling games at places that aren't typical game selling venues.
Absolutely.
um,
Yeah.
so I think about, just going down to like the open street in my neighborhood, and they would let if I emailed them, I could set up a booth there and sell some games. So that's definitely like an option that I'm thinking about more. I still would be interested to pitch, and I would be really interested to pitch a game like this and just see what people thought and see how
Hmm.
publishers responded. I do think that like I don't know if adulting is the game that's going to do this, but I think that there needs to be like some unranked games that break into that, like being sold on the shelves of Barnes and Noble and Target.
Yeah.
Maybe not Target right now, but but that get sold in
Yeah. The big box
big
retail
places
stores. Yeah.
that are all over the place. Like I think that yeah, like Wingspan did for just cozy themes. I think I think that something on it'll take something like reaching that level, I think,
Right.
for people to stop saying, "What is this?" like, you know. Now you can make a game about birds, and people are like, oh, "Okay, great." I
Right.
think when Elizabeth Hargrave did that, we are like, "What the hell? This isn't what games are." Like, so I think that it's similar. Um, I like my highest ambitions would be to create a game that I loved that like did helped to pave that path.
Hmm.
But ultimately, like I do this as a hobby. I do this when I'm exhausted after work, teaching all day, and I'm not like pitch, and also pitching and marketing is like something that doing pitch materials is something that I do not get a lot of joy from. So I don't. I think thinking about indie markets and like just being able to print to myself and going and talking to people face to face and selling games sounds much more appealing to me.
When
So
you
I,
do
I
stuff,
kind of think that that's probably where they'll end.
I love the local market approach. Like I said, I'm a big advocate for it, and I've found that like when you're in those small space communities, people are so pumped up. And when I've talked about like unranked games in local communities, and that's where I've seen the most excitement. And I
Yeah.
find that like people outside the hobby space embrace it way easier because they don't have this
Yeah.
backlog of
Hmm.
reinforcement after reinforcement after reinforcement. So
Hmm.
I think that's a great idea if it's something you want to pursue, and I think the game would do
Yeah.
quite well in that environment. And then frankly, I think it would do well in any environment because it's a great game. But you know what I mean? That's a great avenue for that if you wanted to approach that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
I think people are really hungry for like a genuinely cozy game, and I
Yeah.
think yeah, I would love to see it break through.
Yeah. I think it's um I agree. It feels like coziness is I'm seeing it more like I'm seeing publishers kind of trying to come out with games that feel like genuinely cozy, like at least with
Yeah,
the vibes that like there's the Place for All My Books game that's coming out. Like that game is like trying to it's very cozy, but I think it's still points, right? You're collecting points and you have to
yeah,
be the coziest. You have to collect the most books,
Yeah, yeah,
which I'm,
yeah.
I'm sure it's a great game, but like, I think that I wonder there's that video game Wander Stop that came out
Oh yeah,
recently. Have
yeah.
yeah.
you guys heard
Wander
of it?
Stop is really good. Yeah.
I haven't had the pleasure of playing it yet, but I hear that that game does this really well, right? For video games, that it like that game actively fights against these like progression hooks that are so common
Mm-hmm.
in video games. And it's like you just do the things to do the things. You are not gonna be like leveling up and all those like dopamine hits that video games keep you addicted with. It's like actively fighting against those and like through its messaging speaking against them as well.
Right.
Um, so I think and that game's like blowing up. Like that game got a lot of attention and people loved it. So I think that I think you're right. I think that like there is definitely a market for them. There's definitely people want them, and I think Matthew, I, I think it's very insightful to say like maybe that spot is outside of the traditional gaming scene.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are less like full in on the hobby games might might be more amenable to that. Similar to Wingspan, I feel like Wingspan touched people were like, oh, like I'll play this bird game. Like
Completely
maybe I
opened the
wouldn't
market.
play, if you put these other heavy games in front of me of like the similar weight to what Wingspan is. And Wingspan's not a light game. It's not like a casual game.
Right.
But I think people are like, oh, look at these little cute little eggs, all these pretty birds. Like it was more accessible just in its theme. Um, so yeah, I think that outside of and also you have to fight those expectations that we've been talking about much less if you're going outside of the traditional hobby space.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely feels like people who are outside the hobby kind of like accept these kind of assumption breaking like changes that are in unranked games with like much less friction. It's sort of like, okay, this is what I need, this is what I want. Okay, all right. No, like, okay, but do I still win if I get what I need? Like stuff like that. Um
Yeah.
so yeah, it's I'm excited to see it.
Yeah.
You better be. You started a half a company to see it. I was gonna say you better be very excited to see that, Zoe, because yeah, we went all in on it. We made a huge
Yeah,
gamble
yeah.
there. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I got cloaks. We got cloaks.
oh, I didn't know I would have put my cloak on. Yeah, we have Lunar Punk Games cloaks.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, we're very excited. It's a cult,
That'll get people to
sort of
stop at your
cult.
booth at the markets.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like what's with the cloak people over here? What's going on? We're like
And they'll probably expect something kind of funky when they come up to you too.
Oh yeah. I feel like we
They're
shouldn't talk to
approaching the
anyone.
cloak people. They're going to be open minded.
Yeah, we're the table with the cloaks and the propaganda sheets. Like,
Yeah.
there's something going on over there.
It's like what is we're just going all in on the this is weird. So it'll definitely pay off. Um Eric, first of all, it's been really insightful kind of hearing your journey up till now. Are you working on other unranked games outside of adulting? Like what have you kind of
Yeah.
explored the medium further?
Yeah, I think adulting, as kind of was the theme of this talk, adulting was like my competitive game that I then transformed into a unranked game in the search of coziness. But I've had a couple ideas. The ones that I'm most actively thinking about and pursuing are a game called Secret Secrets that I brought to
Mm,
Protospiel Online, which is that one's, I guess, multi-victor, right? Because
hmm.
you definitely can win.
Hmm.
There is a winner, but there can be multiple winners, and it's based on Milda Matilda's uh, or
Pax
Matilda
Penny.
Swan. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
What's her? Yeah, yeah. Pax Penny. Yeah, thank you. Um, I think I said her Discord name, not her actual name.
Yeah, I
But
think Milda Matilda, I think is like the name of the company or her,
yeah,
it's also like her Discord username.
yeah, I think that's her
But yeah, I
Discord
think it's
username. So it's just
Matilda Simonson.
yes, yes, that's right. But Pax Penning, in that game you can you're like exchanging influence, and you can put your influence to someone else, and then if they win, but they have more of your influence than their own, you can kind of steal their victory. So
Mm.
I really love that mechanic, and I wanted to make just a really simple version of that. So this game's all about like schoolyard kids exchanging secrets and rumors about each other.
Ooh.
Um, and
Yeah.
and speaking of like expectations as well, and people like joining a game like that, the first playtest I had of that, Zoe played, and Zoe was like primed for this kind of game, right? And came in and about, 3 turns in was like, okay, I'm gonna go for a win and I want an alliance with the two of you, and like totally leaned fully into what that game, the like multi-victor experience that game's trying to have, and it was phenomenal. It was a great game. Like I got great feedback from it, but I think that game relied on Zoe, right? Like
Mm.
the game itself was like a little flimsy, like the mechanics of the game. But if someone like leaned into it fully, like that it was great. So I'm trying to find the mechanics for that game that really like let that end game condition shine,
Mm.
um, because I think it I think it could be great. It was great, but it relied on a player who was like, I know what this game's trying to do, and I'm gonna do what it's trying to do. Um,
Is
so
is
yeah,
that
Yeah,
so
that
something?
was.
that's
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that was like one of my highlights from Protospiel. I just loved that game so much, and I was like sad that it was like oh, it bombed in the next couple playtests.
I did make
But
some changes to it, but like I'm partially culpable as well. But I think that you are from my perspective, you were very responsible for why that game was so good the first time.
Yeah, I might have poisoned the playtest a little, being like, oh, I know how to play this game.
I think that too is like something I've learned through this experience is to be aware of that, of like, oh, Zoe did something that the game, like, I just explained the end condition and you picked up on what that was trying to go for and like leaned fully into it. Um, Whereas, like, I think all connected to this expectation setting, like, I was attuned enough to that to say, okay, if someone didn't do that, this game doesn't go that way, right? If someone doesn't like
Right.
lean fully into it like that. Um,
um, what I wanted to ask, what are some of the design decisions that you've kind of made to maybe help new players go down those
mhm,
ridiculous paths that someone like Zoe or myself might do because we've kind of been in this genre of games for a while now? How do you kind of
mhm.
what are some of the level levers that you pull for that?
Yeah. I think it's that aspect of like, for a game like that's multi-victor, it's like, how do you have that balance between, okay, I'm trying to achieve what I want to. I'm trying to reach my goal, but
Hmm.
also I need to help other people to reach that goal. I can't just do it by myself. And I
Right.
think that's with adulting. I think that's similar. It's like you you have a. Uh, I think that for me at least, that's where I'm trying to explore with these mechanics is to reach my goal. I have to cooperate with other people and to some degree, and
Right.
if I don't, it's like either I can't win or no or none of us are going to win. Like with adulting, if nobody does this, you know, in secrets is like if I just try to win on my own, um, it's not going to happen. I like need to have some kind of collusion with other players.
Right.
Um, so I think trying to think. I know that that's not a specific game mechanic, but thinking about that behind the mechanics of what mechanics can I put in place that facilitate that sort of experience where I'm
Hmm.
able to like help other people or do things that are good for other players that are like in turn helping me achieve my objective or are maybe a little like, oh, I'll do this for you and then maybe I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. Like
Right.
I think bread does that really well, right? It's like, okay, I don't need bread right now, I'm gonna give this to you. I don't need a bakery, I'm gonna give this to you. But then when I'm in need, I hope someone comes and helps me out, and so I think that aspect of creating a game state where um, you can't just be individualistic, like chasing after your own thing, but the game mechanics require some aspect of collaboration. Even and I think with Secrets, the thing I'm really trying to learn that is that it's like collaboration, but then kind of some backstabbing, right? Like there's collaboration, but then, oh, but I don't need you anymore. And actually, maybe I could win it. Now that you've helped me, maybe I could win this on my own.
Mm.
If I can kind of cut you out, right? And so that aspect of it, it makes me think of one of my favorite games. Before I'd heard of Unranked or anything. This isn't an Unranked game. It's called Moonrakers. This is a
Yeah.
deck building game. And in that game, it's single victor. You're all you're like, space mercenaries going on contracts. But most of the contracts you cannot complete on your own, right? It's impossible, especially at the beginning of the game. It's impossible to do most of these contracts on your own. So you choose a contract and you have to get some other people to go in with you, and then you're negotiating how you're going to split up the rewards, right? And that game, it's not unranked. It's single victor. So there's a lot of tension when you're splitting up those rewards of, okay, who's getting what? Like I'm gonna give you enough to convince you to go with me, but not so much because I don't want you to beat me. I think that the specific challenge of the unranked game is to retain that tension when there's not the threat of, if you get too much, you might beat me,
Mm.
right? I have another game that I'm working on that's multi-victor called Greedy Gourmands, where you're
I love that
like
name.
at a yeah. Thanks. I like the alliteration,
Yeah.
but it's you're like trying to have a dinner and you're like served food and you're trying to trade bites of food with other people to be satisfied with your meal to get to be full by the end of the round, but like not overeat of certain types of food. And that's been one of the challenges of that game is like the trading and stuff is interesting, but in many I've had trouble to like put tension in that game because sometimes like, well, we can all just get what we want if we collaborate and trade well with each other. There's not much incentives to like to kind of mess with other people, to be selfish, to hold things on to yourself. And maybe I just need to make it harder to get what you want, harder to for everybody to achieve their goal. But yeah, that's I think like a trading games like that. I think unranked games. One of the challenges with that mechanic that I was just talking about, where you want people to collaborate, is that you also need to make it so that they can't just fully collaborate. It can't. It's
Yeah.
or at least there's some friction to that. Like it's not so easy to just let's all work together and then we win.
A couple wrinkles in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And that makes me think about that thing that Nikki Case made, the I forgot, like the evolution of trust or something, where they were like modeling. Shoot, I can't remember their pronoun. Yeah, they were modeling like a like the prisoner's dilemma thing, and showing like algorithmically like what kind of behavior kind of like succeeds the most in those kind of like prisoner dilemma type games over time, and what causes them to sort of fall apart. um, and um, and one of the ways that those systems could like go from like highly collaborative being the optimal thing to like things kind of falling apart is like introducing like noise and static and like your like actions. So like you choosing to cooperate, like there's like some chance that like even though you chose to cooperate, like you ended up doing the selfish action by like just because of system glitch or something like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
that causes like a whole chain reaction of like, did that person do that on purpose,
Mm-hmm.
or like was that a mistake? Should I like give them a chance, or do I need to punish this behavior?
Mm-hmm.
And like when there's enough of that noise, then like the cooperation kind of breaks down. So
Mm-hmm.
uh
Yeah.
I don't know why I went on this tangent. I'm sorry.
No, no, I
it was.
think that's great.
It sounds like a great game.
Well, and
Yeah,
because
it's
I think
cool.
that is what we're talking about, right? Is like you can't you that kind of noise, that static, into just because I've had that. I think I've had that happen with other multi-victor games I've been a playtester for, where a
Mm.
player will say, "Well, can't we all just work together?" You know, and it's like, well, you can try. You know, I think with
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
a lot
yeah.
of games, it's like I think Duck Duck Chooses is that way. You know, Duck Duck Chooses like, well, can't we just like all work together and then we can solve this every time? It's like, well, good luck. You
Yeah, you
know,
try, see what
you can
happens. Yeah, yeah. Give it your best
you can
shot.
try.
I'd love to see
and
it.
Yeah,
I mean, I think
yeah.
a game like that uses like a timer, you know, like the time limit in that game is essential, right? If there wasn't a time limit, I think you could. I think that's the static. If didn't have that time limit, you could just kind of math it out of, okay, we're going to make sure everybody gets the things they need. We're going to split these things up. Um,
And
so to
then
have that time limit is like, can we figure this all out so quickly? Um, yeah.
It's awesome.
another aspect of noise that we added to that. I'm not sure if you played this iteration, but we made it so like some of the cards were hidden. Like it used to be that all
Oh
the
yeah,
cards
yeah,
were
yeah,
face up, and then we changed it so like a fifth of the cards are like face
yeah,
down, and only the person who got them actually knew what they were. And that
yeah.
was like all the static that that game needed to like cause people to
Yeah.
be like, are they hiding the fourth coin over there? Like, do I need to get
Mhm.
another one? Like,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
I played that game both versions with and without the hidden information. And yes, the hidden information makes that game so much spicier. It's great. But and that's a great example of just like a little bit of static can take like the game was perfect. You just flip one of those cards over and that's all it needed.
I love it. Um, we're coming up here on the end of our episode. It's been an amazing time chatting with you tonight, Eric. how can we follow you and your projects? And do you have any other insight you'd like to offer people listening in?
Yeah, I mean, as far as where to follow me, I think I'm in Break My Game uh and on Protospiel Online. Those are my two communities I attend to the most often. So come play games with me there. Um, and as far as like last uh, pieces of insight, I think is just to like try things out, but get creative. Like I think the big lesson I've learned through this whole experience has just been like that new ideas take time to gestate in
Mm,
at least in my brain. Like I think of myself as pretty open-minded, but when I hear about something and then when I like really understand it, just takes time and like persistence to keep listening, to keep paying attention. And I heard about this non-hierarchical games and I said, what the heck is, I don't understand this. But let me keep listening and let me keep paying attention. And now I'm like trying to make games in space. So yeah, just keep an open mind and keep trying new things, and you'll benefit from it.
I love it. Thanks so much for your time tonight. It really means the world, and we're looking forward to playing more of your games.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really an honor to be invited to come talk to you both.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah,
Have a great one, everyone.
you
Good
have a
night.
lovely night.
The night is for
Good
everyone. We'll
night
see you next time.
for everyone.